In the final years of his life, Burt Lancaster, one of Hollywood's most commanding screen icons, began to speak with an honesty that stunned even his closest friends. Known for his piercing eyes and fearless performances in classics like From Here to Eternity and Elmer Gantry, Lancaster had spent decades in the very heart of old Hollywood, a place of glamour on the surface, but rot underneath. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Burt had seen it all: the betrayals, the secret deals, the exploitation that broke so many dreams. And as age stripped away the illusion of stardom, he decided to tell the truth. In several private conversations during the late 1980s, and again before his death in 1994, Lancaster opened up about the 7 people he said had poisoned Hollywood from the inside. He wasn't talking about rivalries or artistic disagreements. He was talking about power and evil. Actors who smiled for the cameras while destroying reputations behind closed doors. Stars who manipulated, blackmailed, and betrayed to stay at the top. Men and women whose charisma hid something darker. Something that Lancaster said Hollywood never wanted the world to see. When these names were revealed, some surprising, others not, those close to Burt were left speechless. This wasn't gossip. This was a reckoning. What he said in those final days would rewrite how many people viewed the golden age of cinema. And for the first time, we're pulling back the curtain on Burt Lancaster's haunting confession. And the 7 actors he believed carried the darkest hearts in Hollywood shimmered with light. Velvet curtains, champagne toasts, and stars so bright they seemed untouchable. But behind the golden glow of the silver screen, Burt Lancaster had seen something else entirely: manipulation, betrayal, and cruelty disguised as charm. In his later years, Lancaster began to open up to a few trusted friends and journalists, hinting that Hollywood's golden age was not as pure as the public believed. It was a kingdom built on silence, he once said, and silence always hides something rotten. He described his early days at the studios in the 1940s, how young, hopeful actors arrived with dreams, only to be chewed up and discarded. Studio executives controlled every aspect of an actor's life: their image, their voice, even their relationships. But Lancaster claimed the true rot didn't just come from the studio bosses. It came from some of the stars themselves. They were gods on screen, he said, and devils when the cameras stopped rolling. The first of these 7, he described, was a man everyone loved: a tall, silver-haired leading actor whose smile could melt audiences and whose temper could destroy careers. Behind the scenes, Lancaster said, he used fear as his currency. He would sabotage co-stars, spread rumors, and pull strings with studio heads to have rivals blacklisted. To the public, he was the image of charm. To those who worked with him, he was a nightmare. Lancaster recalled one incident where a young actress, new to the studio system, refused his advances. Within months, she was gone. Her contract canceled, her name erased from upcoming projects. That's how it worked, Lancaster said bitterly. Charm on the poster, cruelty in the shadows. The second figure he spoke about wasn't a man, but a woman. A beloved starlet, known for her beauty and elegance. She was adored by audiences around the world, but Lancaster said she possessed a different kind of malice. She didn't destroy people openly, he explained. She did it with a whisper. Her weapon was gossip. She could end a rival's career simply by suggesting scandal where there was none. A false romance, a hidden habit, a moral failing. In an industry obsessed with image, her quiet rumors carried more power than any producer's order. If she didn't like you, Lancaster said, you disappeared. But what haunted Lancaster most was how normal it all became. It wasn't just a few bad apples, it was an entire culture built on fear and vanity. It wasn't the darkness that scared me, he told a friend near the end of his life. It was how easy it was to live in it. He admitted he'd seen careers destroyed for the smallest mistakes, A missed line, a refusal to flatter the right ego, or simply standing in the wrong person's spotlight. And while he never considered himself perfect, he tried to distance from that corruption as his career grew. "I wasn't innocent," he once said, "but I knew where the line was, and they didn't." These first two evil figures were only the beginning. Lancaster hinted there were 5 more, each more cunning, more dangerous, and more deeply woven into the studio machine. As he aged, he seemed to carry the weight of their secrets. "It wasn't just what they did," he said softly once. "It was how many people helped them do it." Hollywood was a dream factory, but in Lancaster's final years, he wanted people to know the truth. That for every dream made there, a dozen were quietly destroyed. As Burt Lancaster grew older, the charm of Hollywood began to fade before his eyes. The studio lots that once glowed with creative energy now felt heavy with ghosts. Of the dreams that had been stolen, and of the people crushed beneath the glimmering machine. He began to speak more freely, not with bitterness, but with the quiet exhaustion of a man who had carried too many secrets for too long. "The thing about evil in Hollywood," he said once, "is that it doesn't wear horns. It wears tuxedos." The third figure he spoke of was a man adored by audiences for his on-screen heroism, the kind of rugged, masculine actor who embodied courage and strength. On film, he fought for justice and freedom. Off-screen, Lancaster said, he ruled by intimidation. "He didn't just play the hero," Burt murmured. "He used it to hide what he really was." Crew members whispered about his cruelty, the way he berated stuntmen, humiliated extras, and used his fame to silence those who challenged him. Once, Lancaster claimed, a young director tried to stand up to him after he'd lashed out at a female co-star. Within a week, that director was replaced. "No one crossed him," Lancaster said. "He had friends in every corner of the business, and he made sure people remembered who they owed." This man's career flourished for decades, celebrated by critics and adored by audiences. Yet, behind the legend, there were dozens of broken people who couldn't speak out. Because in those days, the truth wasn't marketable. Studios protected their stars at any cost. The fourth evil figure was very different. Not overtly cruel, but quietly manipulative. Lancaster described her as a spider in silk, a glamorous leading lady who always appeared angelic in interviews, yet left turmoil wherever she went. "She didn't shout," he recalled. "She smiled while she destroyed you." She was known for her intelligence and cunning. She could flatter producers, charm directors, and turn castmates against one another, all without raising her voice. Her power came from her ability to make others believe they were in control, even as she pulled every string. "She could make you think you were her best friend," Lancaster said, "and then she'd take your part in the next picture." He told one story about a promising young actress who became this woman's understudy. The young star admired her deeply, until she realized the veteran actress had sabotaged her every opportunity, spreading quiet doubts about her temperament and reliability. "She wanted the spotlight all to herself," Lancaster said sadly, "and she always got it." What disturbed Lancaster most wasn't just the cruelty, it was how easily the industry rewarded it. "Hollywood gave them trophies," he said bitterly. It called them legends. By the 1970s, the system had changed. The old studio contracts were breaking down, new voices were emerging, and the illusion of Hollywood perfection was starting to crack. But for Lancaster, the scars from those earlier decades never faded. He had seen too many good people destroyed by the ones who knew how to play the game. In his final interviews, he didn't sound angry, just heartbroken. He admitted there were days he'd asked himself whether it was worth it. "The fame, the money, the applause. It all meant nothing when I remembered the people who didn't make it," he said. "The ones who lost everything because of someone else's ambition." But Lancaster wasn't done talking. There were still 3 more names he hinted at, people whose influence went far beyond the screen. They weren't just actors, they were architects of the darkness, the ones who shaped the very culture that allowed cruelty to thrive. And in his final years, Lancaster decided to reveal not only who they were, but how they had turned Hollywood into something far more dangerous than anyone ever imagined. By the mid-1980s, Burt Lancaster had already distanced himself from the glamour of Hollywood. He spent most of his days in quiet reflection, often revisiting the memories he had tried for years to bury. When an interviewer once asked him what haunted him the most about his career, his answer was chillingly simple: the devils we celebrated. The 5th person he spoke of was a man who defined charm, a leading actor whose smile could sell a movie before it was even filmed. To the world, he was elegance and grace personified. But to those who worked beneath him, he was a master manipulator. Lancaster described him as the kind of man who made you feel like you owed him your soul just for being near him. This actor had an uncanny ability to read people, especially their weaknesses. He'd offer mentorship to struggling co-stars, only to later exploit their trust. He didn't yell or threaten, Lancaster said. He made you believe you needed him. Rumors spread that he blacklisted several young actors who refused to play by his rules, using his friendships with producers to quietly end their careers. One particular story stayed with Lancaster for years. A young director had cast the man in a film that was meant to be a turning point in cinema, raw, honest, and bold. But the star didn't like being overshadowed by the supporting cast. Within days, he convinced the studio to rewrite the script, ensuring every powerful moment belonged to him. The director, devastated, later confessed, "He didn't just take over my movie, he took my future." Lancaster sighed when he recalled that memory. He wasn't evil because he hated others, he said. He was evil because he loved himself more than truth. The 6th figure, though, was even darker, a woman whose beauty was legendary and whose ambition had no limits. She was adored by millions, but behind the curtain she used every connection, every weakness, to climb higher. Lancaster referred to her only as the Queen of Shadows. She began her career in poverty, clawing her way up through the Hollywood hierarchy with charm and precision. She knew how to play the game better than anyone, Burt said. She smiled for the cameras, cried on cue, and destroyed anyone who stood in her way. There was one story Lancaster could never forget. A fellow actress, a dear friend of his, had confided that she was terrified of this woman. "She could ruin you with a single whisper," she said. And that's exactly what happened. One quiet rumor about unprofessional behavior was enough to end her friend's career. No one questioned it. In those days, gossip spread faster than truth. But what made this woman truly dangerous, according to Lancaster, wasn't just her manipulation. It was her ability to pretend innocence. She would stand at award shows, thanking everyone, smiling like an angel, he said. And yet, half the room was filled with people she had buried. Years later, when asked if he regretted not speaking out sooner, Lancaster's eyes darkened. "You couldn't," he said. "Back then, the studios owned your image, your silence, even your soul. If you spoke against one of their stars, you'd disappear." As his health declined, Lancaster became more determined to set the record straight, not to destroy reputations, but to expose a truth he believed future generations needed to hear. Hollywood wasn't built on dreams, he said quietly. It was built on sacrifices, some of them human. He paused, looking down at his hands. "But I'll tell you this, evil never wins forever. Time exposes everything." And he was right. Because as Lancaster's confessions slowly surfaced, the world began to re-examine those so-called Golden Age idols. Behind the shimmering lights and magazine smiles, there were cracks, fractures revealing the price of unchecked power. Yet even after naming 6 of the darkest souls he'd encountered, Burt hinted there was one more. The worst of them, he said cryptically, wasn't in front of the camera. He was the man who made us all dance. That final revelation, about the 7th and most powerful figure, would shake everything Lancaster's fans believed about old Hollywood. It was late in Burt Lancaster's life, the sun setting over Los Angeles, a golden hue spilling through the window of his modest home, when he made his final and most haunting confession. His voice had grown softer, slower, but there was still steel in his tone when he spoke of the 7th man. This wasn't an actor in the traditional sense. He wasn't seen on the silver screen, didn't receive awards, and never appeared at premieres. Yet his influence reached into every studio, every casting call, and every script greenlit during Hollywood's golden age. He was the invisible hand, Lancaster whispered, and the rest of us were puppets. The man had begun his career as a producer, charming, brilliant, and endlessly persuasive. In an era when studios ruled everything, he became the power behind the curtain, pulling strings with quiet precision. Actors adored him, directors feared him, and executives owed him. He had a way of making people believe that success was only possible through him. And for a while, it was true. Lancaster described how this figure would manipulate contracts, pit co-stars against each other, and even orchestrate public scandals to boost ticket sales. He didn't just control movies, Burt said. He controlled people's lives. He built gods and destroyed them, depending on what sold more tickets. What made the man's influence so chilling was his ability to turn morality into marketing. Scandal? He'd spin it into box office gold. Betrayal? He'd sell it as passion. He taught Hollywood how to profit from sin, Lancaster said. And the rest of us learned the lesson too well. In one story, Burt recalled how a promising young actor came to this man, desperate for a break. The producer offered him fame in exchange for loyalty. Absolute, unquestioning loyalty. Within months, the actor was a star. But when he dared to walk away, the producer quietly leaked stories that ruined him. Within a year, he vanished from Hollywood. He was a ghost before he even knew what had happened, Burt said grimly. As Lancaster's health declined, he grew more reflective, no longer angry, just weary. We all helped him, he admitted. Every time we stayed silent, every time we turned away. He spoke of moments when he could have stood up, could have said something, but chose not to. Fear kept us quiet. Money made us blind. When his interviewer asked if he ever confronted the man, Burt chuckled softly. Once, he said. I told him the way he treated people would catch up with him one day. The man had only smiled and replied, Burt, the camera forgets everything. That line haunted Lancaster for years. He believed fame erased sin, Burt said, but I wanted people to remember. As his final days approached, Lancaster grew determined to tell the full story. Not just of one man, but of an entire system built on manipulation, greed, and ego. He hoped that by speaking out, he might give future generations of actors the courage to demand better. Hollywood will always have its villains, he said, but it's the silence that keeps them powerful. When the interview tapes were finally reviewed after his death, the journalist who recorded them said she could feel the weight of his regret in every word. He wasn't seeking revenge, she wrote. He was seeking peace. In his last note, scribbled in shaky handwriting, Lancaster left one final message. If you love the dream, don't forget the price. The lights that shine the brightest often cast the darkest shadows. Those who heard his confession say it changed the way they saw Hollywood forever. The golden era wasn't just glamour and charm. It was a battlefield of souls, where fame and morality clashed under the studio lights. And perhaps that was the true tragedy of Burt Lancaster's legacy. Not that he witnessed the darkness, but that he carried it with him. A burden only lifted when he finally told the truth. Even in his silence, the echo of that truth remains, a reminder that behind every timeless smile, every red carpet triumph, and every golden statue, there are stories the screen will never show.